Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. All right. Welcome to podcast number 4.
Whoop, whoop.
We promised last week, after we did the basics, that we were going to get to more salacious undressing.
Juicy.
Whatever we called it. I know I made a promise and I always keep them, right?
Right.
So we're going to get down to it. We're going to spend this podcast talking a little about the things we talked about before in a relationship that causes some contention and discord. But we're going to move it into the bedroom and talk about our sexual relationships and how this shows up in our sexual relationships. I'll start with a little background on myself.
Sure, go for it.
I think I grew up the normal boy.
Really?
Very aware of myself and my sexuality, my desires, what I wanted and thought I needed, and very much aware of those. And then when we showed up to the marriage bedroom, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And all those things that I thought I knew and wanted and desired and were going to be great were not automatic. Let's just put it that way. And this thing that I was looking forward so much for was a chore. It was work, and it didn't pan out the way I thought it would. And so I really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to fix Amy.
I was the problem. It's
Definitely
me.
Amy was the problem. If she could just understand her own sexuality, if she could just get this right.
If I could just get fixed.
Yes, if we could fix Amy, our sex life would be perfect.
Right.
Very much so. And so that's how I went about it. Babe, tell me how that worked.
Not at all. It was terrible. It felt pressuring, undesirable, unattractive, repulsive, and so on.
So I was unattractive doing that?
Yes.
What about yourself? Were you attracted to yourself or had your own desires or knew what they were?
I think I was so busy fending off yours, trying to find space for me, that I don't even think I really considered me. I was really just trying to keep you off of me.
Literally.
Right.
Right. Well, tell us a little about like how you grew up and what you knew about your sexuality at a young age.
Basically nothing. Yeah, he's nodding his head for those of you who aren't watching. And I think that's not untypical for many women. I think males, just in the nature of where their genitals are and that they see them and touch them every day, you know, in just regular routine bathroom stops and so forth, they're just more aware of even their anatomy and their sexuality, and often, not always, but often they're a higher desire partner or a higher desire person, so their desire is more spontaneous anyways. And spontaneous meaning that it's more present, it's more accessible, they have more access to their own eroticism and sexual desires. It's just more ever present. They don't have to try and think about what they might like or if that might feel good. It's very present with them.
Let's talk a little bit about the social aspects of it too, because you were taught very much a certain way about your sexuality and what it should look like, right?
Yes, I was taught to be the gatekeeper, to be the one to not tempt men, to make sure that I wore things that were modest, which there's nothing wrong with modesty, honestly. I think modesty in its pure form is very attractive and respectable, and it is about understanding and respecting yourself. But this form of modesty was to make sure that I wasn't tempting to the males around me, and to make sure that I was always guarding myself and my virtue because if I lost my virtue, then my worth was also lost.
Yeah, you had some pretty bad experiences around this too, right? Like maybe guys trying to grab you or do things that would show you, then back up, that if you weren't careful, there were going to be men that were going to try to take advantage and take something from you that wasn't theirs and that was yours to protect.
Yes. Just in crowds and public places and schools. Yes. I had many instances where, I was grabbed or groped or approached in ways that were very uncomfortable and frankly scary.
So we come into a marriage, into the marriage bed with all this baggage, not knowing how to resolve this. Obviously, I went about it the very wrong way. She just told you. I don't think I've ever heard her say it this quite succinctly, so I'm trying to deal with that emotion right now and go through it.
I didn't say
about
you
how
were
unattractive I was, or my behavior was.
Your behavior.
I'll put it my behavior. But I don't think you ever said that, so I'm processing that right now. But I think it's true. I was very, very unattractive. And the more that I did this, the more you ran from it and protected yourself in it. And
the more I became the gatekeeper.
You became more of a gatekeeper. And even though we were having sexual relationships, and even though that they were physically looking like they were successful, you were having orgasms, so was I, none of that was working.
Well, we kind of talked about in the male versus female eroticism that it is very different, and that women have to have an emotional context that they find desirable. They have to feel good about themselves and their bodies, or at least have room to think that their sexuality, bodies, etc. are desirable. So that's bringing a context and emotions. They have to feel safe in a relationship. And if all of those aren't in place, you can be having sex or intercourse, but it's not meaningful. It's not desirable. It has undertones of servicing and duty and obligation, and that is not desirable.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I read a study one time, and this was devastating to me, to be honest with you, that they did a study of women that were going through and having sexual relationships with their spouses out of obligation, because they thought that that's what they needed to do because it was their spouse's right to have that sexual relationship.
It was what good wives
It was what good wives did. And they actually found that there was PTSD symptoms in these spouses. And for me to think that my behavior had caused any such thing was just devastating to me. But really, in those moments when you were having to be so protective and I was having to be so needy and grabby and going after what I desired, it really did put you in this position of trauma, right?
Yes, it did. And it took some untangling. It took some coaching. We did go to a couple of therapists, and I do love therapists, but unfortunately in this case, the therapists weren't that helpful for us. So we were actively trying to resolve these issues. We were aware of them. We just didn't know how to untangle them. We wanted to be together. We wanted to be able to have good intimacy, good connection. And the way we went about it was pretty wrong. It was pretty much, I was the problem and you were trying to fix me.
And we both are the problem.
Well, true. 'Cause yes. Like, I guess from my perspective, it was if he would just stop pursuing and if he could just calm down, then maybe I could move towards him. And from your side, it was like if she would just initiate and maybe go crazy, or how would you say it? Maybe if I would
just choose to have desire and want this thing, in this thing called a sexual relationship. There seemed to be zero need or desire or want for it. And I think the truth is, or in both, right? It really took both of me calming the heck down, which was one of the things. I had a client at one of our retreats, and that was our main motto: just calm the heck down. Like if you would just calm down, you give her room to be able to do anything, but you can't calm down. So it took me calming the heck down and you really wanting a desire to figure out what this whole sexual thing meant to you.
Which I often, two things about that. First of all, when one spouse is needy and pursuant and thinking that if this other spouse just gives me XYZ, whatever it is, coached many different clients, and sometimes it's like, this spouse would just compliment me every day, if my spouse would just give me blowjobs, if my spouse would just initiate, if my spouse would fill in the blank, right? We think that their behavior will make us feel a certain way. So there's a trap in that. And the trap is that they can't make you feel that way. And that behavior can even happen, and you likely will still not feel that way.
Isn't that crazy? That to me was something that I learned that was just mind-blowing and very helpful, right? Like, no matter what actions you did or said, things you said to me, my mind had to decide whether I thought they were true or not, or whether they were really desirable or not. So even when we think the actions of another person really have impact or control us, ultimately it comes down to what we decide to think about it. And so ultimately the only thing we have control over and that controls our perception is ourselves.
Yes. Our spouses do have impact on us, but we get to decide how we respond and choose. And we often feel like we're victims instead of seeing that we actually have a chance or a way to choose.
Oh, I remember that podcast. We listened to a podcast when you were going through life coaching school from the founder of the life coaching school about victimization and being a victim. And I was so proud of myself that I wasn't one until I listened to this podcast and I went, crap. I think I like to be a victim. So it very much is a trap to put ourselves into.
Because when you think someone else's behavior will make a difference for you, then you are disempowered and you are going to try to do everything you can to get them to do something. And you can never get someone to authentically do something.
So you were telling me, the clients you coached that said, if my wife would just give me a blowjob, everything would be great. That didn't turn out to be true?
No, I'm not saying anything against blowjobs, but it does not have the power that you think it has. What has the power is your own thoughts and feelings and ability to regulate yourself, the meaning that you create in it. A spouse could be giving all the blowjobs, and there could still, so if one spouse is thinking, if I just had blowjobs, then I wouldn't feel depressed. Let's just say that, for example. And so the wife or the husband, the spouse, whomever, starts giving all the blowjobs, and guess what? Depression's still there. It didn't fix it, because you can't fix another person. You can support them, you can love them, you can cheer them on, you can encourage them, you can have influence, but you cannot control.
I wonder why, because I've been in this spot myself, why we think that if my spouse would do this one thing, it would be the total marker of her desiring and wanting and choosing me. Why do you think the mind goes there? Why does it pick that one thing? Is it a boundary thing? Do you think we're crossing a boundary, and if they're willing to cross a boundary with us, is it any ideas?
We inherently have expectations. I don't think you can be a human without having expectations. And we inherently try to track others' behaviors. I don't think you can be a human without tracking someone else. So it's not that you have to discard and get rid of tracking and expectations, but you have to be aware of what you're tracking and expecting and what you think it will mean. And when you think, if my spouse does XYZ, then I will feel ABC, you are going to be wrong. What creates that feeling for you is going to come within you, not from someone else. And the spouse can do what you think, and you cannot feel that way. So it is a little bit of a trap. And you can think, if my spouse just cleaned the house, then I would be happy. If my spouse just did the dishes, then I would be less stressed. If my spouse just initiated sex, then I would know they love me. And we're constantly trying to measure if we are loved, and in that measuring we get lost. And instead of measuring if someone else loves us or is choosing us, it's far more productive to look at ourselves and see within our control, are we choosing to be loving? Are we choosing to be the kind of person we want to be? Because that's actually what we have control over. And are we choosing to invest in this relationship? that's where you have the most power and you get the most empowered. So that's where you have the most influence.
Yeah. As we're talking through this, I think we've set the stage pretty well about how wanting something so much and driving through that and thinking that if this thing is so important to me and we've done that will fix everything as a problem. But let's go a little bit into how to solve this. And even as we're talking right now, I can clearly see the moment when this started to change for me. I was taking a course on intimacy from a male's perspective, and I was being taught, I was listening to this, so I can take myself back. I had my headset on.
Mm-hmm.
I was volunteering at the horse therapy ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And my very favorite day volunteering when was no one else was there.
Mm-hmm.
So this was Sundays, and I got to do this once or twice a month where I'd go on Sundays and I would feed all the horses in the morning. It would be beautiful. It would be quiet.
Peaceful.
Horses around and not people. That's the best thing in the whole entire world.
Sunrise.
Sunrise. I watched the sunrise. It was just beautiful. And I had my headset in, so I was listening to it, and we were doing a session. When they came up on the session of this word that kicked my ass, sorry about the language, but it did, validation.
Mm-hmm.
They started talking about validation. And oh my gosh, I'm a validation whore. Like, I am. Not only am I seeking this in my intimate relationships with my wife, which I was, this is what was driving me to really desire these things. It wasn't out because I really wanted to connect with her. I wanted Amy to be able to tell me through her sexual relationship that I was good and good enough. And
More
I was
than
validated,
good.
and I was great and I was the best.
Yes.
That's one thing. But I was doing it at work. I was doing it at church. I was seeking it from my kids. I was doing it everywhere in my life. And it was a frying pan. We have a picture that we took in our things of me coming after you with a frying pan just for funny.
Yes.
But for this one.
In our website photos.
Yeah. This was an iron skillet to the head. It was crushing blow.
It was a crushing blow, but it was also really the beginning of the new you that was far more easy to connect with and be open and vulnerable. When you finally let go of that, it was like, oh.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not saying, it was the right thing and what I needed to do. I'm just telling you, it hit home.
It hit that ego pretty hard.
Yeah, I had studied a lot. We were trying to figure this out. We were really working on it. I had listened to podcasts.
I think at that point, I was still the problem. Yeah. In your mind. And so when this validation...
you're finally admitting it after all these years?
Right.
Oh.
Right. I was...
In my mind, yes.
You were still trying to fix me. Yes. You were still trying to send me to places and do things and, take all the sites and, oh, hey, we should try this and, hey, but this position and that. You were constantly trying to fix me. And when you heard this podcast, it struck you that, oh, behind all of these actions is me trying to fix her so that I can feel better.
Yep. It struck me to the core. Now, the good news of this was, for me, it didn't become that difficult to fix this problem because, again, I was the problem and I have control of that, which is nice to know. And literally, I could catch myself doing it. And I remember literally talking to myself.
How did you catch yourself?
I just would listen carefully of what the situation I was in, and I would go, oh my gosh, I'm seeking validation. Did
you feel something different when you were talking from maybe a more wholesome, clean place, a less seeking place?
I don't think that came for a while. The first was I was uber aware of it, right?
Like on high alert.
I was on high alert. So I'd be in a situation at work and I'd start to want to form some sentences and say something and I'd go, oh my gosh, I'm seeking validation. Well, the nice thing about it is you can tell yourself you don't need that validation. You're okay just the way you are and you can go on and change what you were about to say.
But what if you didn't feel okay with how you were? What do you think you would do then?
I think instead of seeking to try to solve that through other beings, whether it was you or other places, that I learned that I could solve that myself, that I could take a moment to understand why I was thinking that. We talked about in our last podcast, curiosity, right? Mm-hmm. I think curiosity goes two ways. It goes with if you can be curious about yourself and what's going on. Sometimes I wonder, it's kind of worrisome, like you almost have multi-personalities because I'm literally talking to myself.
No, we have a relationship with ourselves.
And I believe so too. But I literally would tell my brain that was seeking validation, which it came from my, what's that word?
Limbic
brain, the reactionary brain. I told that reactionary brain, thank you very much for doing this. I know you're trying to protect me because I need validation and want me to be good. But guess what? Today I'm going to choose for myself. And I'm going to choose how I'm going to handle that. And I'm going to choose differently. And that changed everything.
It really did. It opened up so much space for us to be able to connect more authentically. And I think at the same time I was doing similar but different work, I was recognizing how much I was over-functioning, doing things to try and get my insecurity solved. So it was a different form of validation seeking. It was like, if I just perfectly clean my house or perfectly align all of my kids' schedules and activities, or if I perfectly plan all of these dinners and meals and have all of these ducks all in a row, then I will know that I'm a good person. I'm a good wife. I'm a good mom, ...
Yeah. Yeah, very much. And so it was easy in those other situations I talked about, like I talked about at work or when I had conversations. I guess the place that wasn't so easy and took a little more work is our sexual relationship. And again, very, very aware of the moment that changed. We're in bed, and I don't know why I got the courage up to say this, because I hadn't had the courage before. But I turned to you and I said, hey, babe, I have a question for you. And I really want you to be honest about this. And I said, what is it that I do that makes it really hard to be in a relationship with me?
And I hesitated.
Well, and this is the thing, is that I was brave to ask the question, but if you wouldn't have come back with what you said next, it never would have worked. You were honest.
I was very honest. And I
was
did
normal.
hesitate first, though.
You did.
I was checking myself to see, is this really what I want to say and how I want to say it? And is this really what's true for me? And can he really handle this truth?
Well, that was the thing, because I hadn't in the past, right? So this was something very new. It was a scary place to go step, because I had probably asked similar questions like this, not this exact one, but it was out of manipulation.
Right. It was, tell me how wonderful I am. Yeah. Tell me all of the amazing things I do.
Or tell me these 3 things I can do so I can get laid, because I want something out of it. But literally, I was at a point where I don't want to validate anymore. I don't want it. And I'm still seeking it in this relationship. So I need to know so I can deal with it. Because you know what drives you crazy and what's hard about being close to me.
And we've since asked that. I've asked it and you've answered honestly, and we've asked it multiple times. It's sort of a check-in question. Like, what's difficult currently about being married to me? And it's hard to answer and it's hard to hear the answer. But that honesty, really, that feedback loop, we all have blind spots and we don't really want to see them. But when you can face them, that's when you can start to move through them. We do a lot of things to run from them, hide from them, avoid, pretend they're not there, but they're there for everyone. I don't care who you are.
So I stood up out of bed and I walked in the bathroom. And what did you do?
I went to come after you to soothe you.
You came running after me and I said, babe, no, I'm okay. I just need to think about what you just said, but I'm okay. And you believed me.
Yes, probably for one of the first times.
Yep.
Because I knew that you had asked in real sincerity and that you had listened and heard, and I could see the processing, and it was like, okay. Because
usually I would just interrupt you just like that, right?
Right. You listened, you heard it, and you were taking it in, and I could literally see the processing happening like in your mind and in your body and in your heart. And the feeling was, this is important. Let him work through this. Trust that he can, and just let this happen.
And it didn't take very long. I remember I processed through most of it, just sitting in the bathroom for a little bit away from you. And then I came back in the bed and I said something to you along these lines. I said, babe, I really want to connect with you and have an amazing, wonderful sexual relationship with you. And I know that I've done an awful job in the past, but I want to let you know that I will not be seeking sex again until you are ready to connect with me and have a true sexual relationship.
Yep. That was both wonderful and terrifying.
And I've had so many clients ask me so many questions around this, because whether we call it a sex fast or whatever it is, they really get to a point where they want to know. Most of my male clients, when they realize what they're doing to their wife, they go to this place, right? They're like, I can't do this anymore. And they ask them, go ahead.
Well, sometimes they go to this place, but really they still have an ulterior motive.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. And that's what I talked about. Like when I tell them, okay, this is a dangerous place to go unless there is no alternative motives.
It really has to be completely generous with no expectation that by doing this, you're going to get a result. It really is, I recognize my part in a pattern and I am stepping back from that pattern and giving you space. Not I'm stepping back so that you will now step in and do this thing that I really want you to do, that I've tried all these other tactics to get you to do, and this is just another tactic veiled not as a tactic.
And in fact, the number one question that a lot of clients ask me that I know they're not quite ready to do this is, how long did it take?
Yes. Because if you're asking how long, you're really measuring and tracking, well, how soon till I get my result.
Yep. And the crazy part about this, we have racked our brains. We have thought. We've gone back to Amy's journals, which usually has a very concise timeline of things.
Thank you, journals.
Even when she's not telling the truth in her journals, she's still
I
right
always tell the truth.
because she has it written down in a journal. we have tried everything to try to remember how long we went without sex, and
neither of us remembers.
I can't tell you.
It wasn't actually the important factor.
No, I cannot tell you. Right now, I can't tell you. I don't know.
Mm-mm. So it wasn't about the time. It was about stopping a pattern and creating space for each of us to heal, for each of us to understand ourselves better, and for each of us to see our part in it. It wasn't about getting a result so much as just creating some space and room to really, I guess, just to process and to stop. It was almost like if you had a really terrible wound or something, like we were stopping the bleeding.
Yeah, it was the triage part of it.
It was a triage, yeah.
I think in the past I would have come to you like on the hour, every hour at least.
Is it time yet? What do you think yet? How's it going?
Have you figured out your sexuality? Like, are you desirous now? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Like, I would have asked a million questions. Here's another book I found. This article might help.
And a lot of higher desire spouses try this, and that's what they're doing. They're like, I think I'm suffering and sacrificing more than my spouse. I don't see them doing the work that I think they should be doing. And
I'm much better at this than they are.
I'm much better. And that's when you know you're not really in the space to do this yet. If you have any type of tracking or any type of timeline or any type of expectation, you're not there yet.
Right, at all. So there's a whole nother probably podcast or two along what happened after that in depth that we can go into, especially watching us go from the enmeshment we talked about in the last podcast. And that's definitely what we were in our sexual marriage. We were enmeshed. And I definitely went to the toxic independent. Like, I don't need it. I'm not going to have it. I don't care. And we'll probably have a whole podcast along that because it's very interesting to see that happen. And it's usually what happens is you go to the other extreme. I just recently was coaching one of my clients, and I tried to explain to him, I thought it was pretty well. I was like, differentiation's in the middle, right? But there's no way to really live differentiated 100% all the time.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's impossible. So you are going back and forth from enmeshment to being on the scale of toxic independent to being differentiated in the middle and every which way. To me, what's changed is that used to be wide. So it would have a wide swing on the pendulum to one or the other. It would take a long time to get back to the center. And now I catch myself sooner. I don't get so wide in that spectrum, and I'm able to get back closer to the center. And that's what happened. But we definitely swung to the swing. We didn't swing.
We
swung to the toxic independent side of it before we got back to more of a differentiated side of it. But I just want to skip a little bit and tell you something. All those fantasies, those dreams, those scripts that I had in my head of exactly how a sexual relationship looked, what it would be to have a great sexual relation in my bed, they are nowhere even close to what happens when I got hell out of the way and let Amy discover what she desired and wanted. And I'm telling you, and I try to tell my clients this, like, you can't imagine how good it can be. It was even better than everything I had fantasized about.
Well, I'm thinking of my clients as we're talking, and we talk about building an adult playground. An adult playground is the safe space that you have for your sexuality, where you can play together with that boundary and fence. And so many of my higher desire clients are like, okay, how fast can we build it? How fast can we get how tall?
How wide?
How many things can we put in? Like, can we do this tomorrow? And they have so much predetermined idea of how that's going to be. There actually isn't room for the other spouse yet. And the ones that have let go, they hold on to the fact that their desire is good and healthy, but they let go of all of those expectations and parameters that it has to look exactly like this or be this thing, or I have to have this thing or that thing. And they open up this space that's generous and collaborative and free, where they're not trying to get, but they're trying to be present, to be connecting. And in that space, that adult playground more authentically and piece by piece is built together collaboratively. And I was talking to another client who said, before I kept trying to get my spouse to build this playground with me, to do these things. I'm going to put this in the playground, and this is what's going to make it work. This is what's going to make it good. And when they finally dropped all those expectations and said, here, I just want to be with you. And when you're ready, and if you're ready, or if you choose, that's what I want. And they opened up room for whatever happened next. And what ended up happening is their spouse felt free to join them. And in that freedom, they started creating a playground that was beyond what he had imagined.
Yep.
And so I think sometimes we focus so hard on trying to get something, and it's about letting go of the getting. You hold on to the goodness of your eroticism, of your sexuality. That's what I don't want you to drop that. You hold on to the goodness of that, but you open up space for it to be collaborative, for it to be something where there's room for both of you, where it's not about control, where it really is about freedom. And that's when you really start to create intimate connections.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important for my higher desire friends out there to realize that those desires that you have are not bad, and you should not dismiss them in any ways. You should be brave enough to hold on to them and be okay with them, even if your spouse doesn't agree with you. Well, I mean, this still just happened last week, right? Mm-hmm. I asked to introduce a new playground equipment into the playground, and you weren't ready for that playground equipment, right?
Nope.
But I didn't go back to myself where I would loathe myself, like, oh, I'm disgusting. Why would I ever want that? That's just terrible. That's where I would have gone before. So friends, don't do that. You're okay with it. In fact, when we talked about this, I finally told Amy, I said, listen, I totally respect that's a boundary and it's outside the playground. I respect that, but it doesn't make it any less desirable for me. Mm-hmm. And so if ever, without any pressure, you decide that that's something you want to build in the playground, I'm more than happy to build that with you in the playground, and we'll be happy about it. But I think it was really, really important that I held on to myself, and I wouldn't do it before. Right. I would make it mean something bad about me. And it's not bad about you. Those sexual desires are not bad. You're not deviant. You're not awful. If you're not using them to manipulate and control your spouse and take something from that they're not giving to you.
It's the manipulation, the taking and control that is problematic, not the inherent desire.
So hold on to yourself, invite, and when they happen to say no, then be like, okay, I get that. Thank you.
I mean, it's going to be disappointing. It's going to be discouraging.
Yes.
And that is an inherent part of marriage, period. There is no spouse who will not disappoint their other spouse at some point, and how you work through and process that disappointment really is the measure of your relationship, because your spouse can't be and do or be everything or do everything for you.
That's right.
Ever.
So we promised a little more spice. I think we gave it this time. Well, you tell us, right? Comment on this.
I don't know. Is that spicy enough? Should we go spicier?
I don't know. We can. Well, I put it as clean on the podcast.
Oh, right. We better keep it clean.
So, again, we've messed this up so bad. We have spent so many years doing it wrong. There is nothing special about us. We don't profess to have magic in any sort of the way. We have scars, and we have learned from hard knocks, and we want to share in that healing process with you. And we want to invite you to come and be healed with us, and to be able to take your relationship up to the next level and learn from the mistakes we made.
You want us to go to church? You want to take us to church?
Take me to church.
Take me to church.
I have clients that we had to schedule some fun, intimate time, and we decided to call it church time on the calendar. So if the kids ever saw it on the calendar, it'd be taking me to church. So I thought that was a good way to explain it.
Absolutely. Take me to church.
So please come join us. Subscribe and like to this podcast.
Go check out our website, langfordlifecoaching.com. Go get your free consult there. We can meet together, figure out how we can help you, what it is you need, what that would look like. That is what we love doing.
Yep. Amen.
Amen.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.